Good evening and welcome to what is the penultimate reading from the book If Only They Could Talk by James Herriot tonight. I am reading chapters 27 and 28. So chapter 27. It was during one of Siegfried's efficiency drives that Colonel Merrick's cow picked up a wire. The colonel was a personal friend, which made things even more uncomfortable. Everybody suffered when Siegfried had these spells. They usually came on after he had been reading a technical work or when he had seen a film of some new technical procedure. He would rampage around, calling on the cowering household to stir themselves and be better men. He would be obsessed for a time with a craving for perfection. We must put on a better show at these operations on the farms. It just isn't good enough to fish out a few old instruments from a bag and start hacking at the animal. We must have cleanliness, asepsis if possible, and an orderly technique. So he was jubilant when he diagnosed traumatic reticulitis, foreign body in the second stomach, in the colonel's cow. We'll really show old Hubert something. We'll give him a picture of veterinary surgery he'll never forget. Tristan and I were pressed into service as assistants, and our arrival at the farm was really impressive. Siegfried led the procession, looking unusually smart in a brand new tweed jacket, of which he was very proud. He was a debonair figure as he shook hands with his friend. The colonel was jovial. "Here you're going to operate on my cow. Take out a wire, eh? Like to watch you do it, if it's all right with you." "By all means, Hubert, please do. You'll find it very interesting." In the borough, Tristan and I had to bustle about. We arranged tables alongside the cow, and on these we placed new metal trays with rows of shining, sterilised instruments. Scalpels, directors, probes, artery forceps, hypodermic syringes, suture needles, gut and silk in glass phials, rolls of cotton wool, and various bottles of spirit and other antiseptics. Siegfried fussed around, happy as a schoolboy. He had clever hands, and as a surgeon he was worth watching. I could read his mind without much trouble. This, he was thinking, was going to be good. When all was to his liking, he took off his jacket and donned a brilliantly white smock. He handed the jacket to Tristan and almost instantly gave a roar of anger. "Hey, don't just throw it down on that metal bin. Here, give it to me. I'll find a safe place for it." He dusted the new garment down tenderly and hung it on a nail on the wall. Meanwhile, I had shaved and disinfected the operation site on the flank, and everything was ready for the local anaesthetic. Siegfried took the syringe and quickly infiltrated the area. "This is where we go inside, Hubert. I hope you aren't squeamish." The colonel beamed. "Oh, I've seen blood before. You needn't worry. I shan't faint." With a bold sweep of the scalpel, Siegfried incised the skin, then the muscles, and finally, with delicate care, the glistening peritoneum. The smooth wall of the rumen, the large first stomach, lay exposed. Siegfried reached for a fresh scalpel and looked for the best place to cut in. But as he poised his knife, the wall of the rumen suddenly bulged out through the skin incision. "Unusual," he muttered. "Probably a bit of ruminal gas." Unflurried, he gently thrust back the protrusion and prepared again to make his cut. But as he withdrew his hand, the rumen welled out after it, a pinkish mass bigger than a football. Siegfried pushed it back, and it shot out again immediately, ballooning to a startling size. This time he took 2 hands to the job, pushing and pressing till he forced the thing once more out of sight. He stood for a moment with his hands inside the cow, breathing heavily. 2 beads of sweat trickled down his forehead. Carefully he withdrew his hands. Nothing happened. It must have settled down. He was reaching back for his knife when, like a live thing, the rumen again came leaping and surging out. It seemed almost as though the entire organ had escaped through the incision, a slippery, gleaming mass rising and swelling till it was level with his eyes. Siegfried had dropped all pretence of calm and was fighting desperately, both arms round the thing, pressing downwards with all his strength. I hastened forward to help, and as I drew near he whispered hoarsely, "What the hell is it?" Clearly he was wondering if this pulsating heap of tissue was some part of the bovine anatomy he had never even heard of. Silently we fought the mass down till it was level with the skin. The Colonel was watching intently. He hadn't expected the operation to be so interesting. His eyebrows were slightly raised. "It must be gas that's doing this," panted Siegfried. "Pass me the knife and stand back." He inserted the knife into the rumen and cut sharply downwards. I was glad I had moved away, because through the incision shot a high-pressure jet of semi-liquid stomach contents, a greenish-brown, foul-smelling cascade which erupted from the depths of the cow as from an invisible pump. The first direct hit was on Siegfried's face. He couldn't release his hold of the rumen, or it would have slipped back into the abdomen and contaminated the peritoneum. So he hung on to each side of the opening while the evil torrent poured onto his hair, down his neck, and all over his lovely white smock. Now and then the steady stream would be varied by a sudden explosion, which sent the fermenting broth spouting viciously over everything in the immediate vicinity. Within a minute the trays with their gleaming instruments were thoroughly covered. The tidy rows of swabs, the snowy tufts of cotton wool disappeared without trace. But it was the unkindest cut of all when a particularly powerful jet sent a liberal spray over the new jacket hanging on the wall. Siegfried's face was too obscured for me to detect any change of expression, but at this disaster I saw real anguish in his eyes. The Colonel's eyebrows were now raised to the maximum, and his mouth hung open as he gazed in disbelief at the chaotic scene. Siegfried, still hanging grimly on, was the centre of it all, paddling about in a reeking swamp which came halfway up his Wellington boots. He looked very like a Fiji islander, with his hair stiffened and frizzled, and his eyes rolling whitely in the brown face. Eventually the flood slowed to a trickle and stopped. I was able to hold the lips of the wound, while Siegfried inserted his arm and felt his way to the reticulum. I watched him as he groped inside the honeycombed organ, far out of sight against the diaphragm. A satisfied grunt told me he had located the piercing wire, and within seconds he had removed it. Tristan had been frantically salvaging and washing suture materials, and soon the incision in the rumen was stitched. Siegfried's heroic stand had not been in vain. There was no contamination of the peritoneum. Silently and neatly he secured the skin and muscles with retention sutures and swabbed round the wound. Everything looked fine. The cow seemed unperturbed. Under the anaesthetic she had known nothing of the titanic struggle with her insides. In fact, freed from the discomfort of the transfixing wire, she appeared already to be feeling better. It took quite a time to tidy up the mess, and the most difficult job was to make Siegfried presentable. We did our best by swilling him down with buckets of water, while all the time he scraped sadly at his new jacket with a flat stick. It didn't make much difference. The Colonel was hearty and full of congratulations. "Come in, my dear chap. Come in and have a drink." But the invitation had a hollow ring, and he took care to stand at least 10 feet away from his friend. Siegfried threw his bedraggled jacket over his shoulder. No, thank you, Hubert. It's most kind of you, but we must be off." He went out of the byre. "I think you'll find the cow will be eaten in a day or two. I'll be back in a fortnight to take out the stitches." In the confined space of the car, Tristan and I were unable to get as far away from him as we would have liked. Even with our heads stuck out of the windows, it was still pretty bad. Siegfried drove for a mile or two in silence. Then he turned to me, and his streaked features broke into a grin. There was something indomitable about him. "You never know what's round the corner in this game, my boys. But just think of this. That operation was a success." Chapter 28. There were 3 of us in the cheerless yard: Isaac Cranford, Jeff Mallock, and myself. The only one who looked at ease was Mallock, and it was fitting that it should be so, since he was, in manner of speaking, the host. He owned the knacker's yard, and he looked on benignly as we peered into the carcass of the cow he had just opened. In Darrowby, the name Mallock had a ring of doom. It was the graveyard of livestock, of farmers' ambitions, of veterinary surgeons' hopes. If ever an animal was very ill, somebody was bound to say, "I reckon she'll be off to Mallock's afore long," or "Jeff Mallock'll have her finish." And the premises fitted perfectly into the picture. A group of drab red brick buildings standing a few fields back from the road, with a stumpy chimney from which rolled endlessly a dolorous black smoke. It didn't pay to approach Mallock's too closely unless you had a strong stomach, so the place was avoided by the townspeople. But if you ventured up the lane and peeped through the sliding metal doors, you could look in on a nightmare world. Dead animals lay everywhere. Most of them were dismembered, and great chunks of meat hung on hooks. But here and there you could see a bloated sheep or a greenish swollen pig, which not even Jeff could bring himself to open. Skulls and dry bones were piled to the roof in places, and brown mounds of meal stood in the corners. The smell was bad at any time, but when Jeff was boiling up the carcasses, it was indescribable. The Mallock family bungalow stood in the middle of the buildings, and strangers could be pardoned if they expected a collection of wizened gnomes to dwell there. But Jeff was a pink-faced, cherubic man in his 40s, his wife plump, smiling and comely. Their family ranged from a positively beautiful girl of 19 down to a robust 5-year-old boy. There were 8 young Mallocks, and they had spent their lifetimes playing among tuberculous lungs and a vast spectrum of bacteria from salmonella to anthrax. They were the healthiest children in the district. It was said in the pubs that Jeff was one of the richest men in town, but the locals, as they supped their beer, had to admit that he earned his money. At any hour of the day or night he would rattle out into the country in his ramshackle lorry, winch on a carcass, bring it back to the yard and cut it up. A dog food dealer came twice a week from Broughton with a van and bought the fresh meat. The rest of the stuff Jeff shoveled into his boiler to make the meat meal, which was in great demand for mixing in pig and poultry rations. The bones went for making fertiliser, the hides to the tanner, and the nameless odds and ends were collected by a wild-eyed individual known only as the Ket Fella. Sometimes, for a bit of variety, Jeff would make long slabs of strange-smelling soap, which found a brisk sale for scrubbing shop floors. Yes, people said, there was no doubt Jeff did all right, but by golf, he earned it. My contacts with Mallock were fairly frequent. A knacker's yard had a useful function for a vet. It served as a crude post-mortem room, a place where he could check on his diagnosis in fatal cases, and on the occasions where he had been completely baffled, the mysteries would be revealed under Jeff's knife. Often, of course, farmers would send in an animal which I had been treating and ask Jeff to tell them what had been wrong with it. And this was where a certain amount of friction arose, because Jeff was placed in a position of power and seldom resisted the temptation to wield it. Although he could neither read nor write, he was a man of great professional pride. He didn't like to be called a knacker man, but preferred fellmonger. He considered in his heart that after 20-odd years of cutting up diseased animals, he knew more than any vet alive, and it made things rather awkward that the farming community unhesitatingly agreed with him. It never failed to spoil my day if a farmer called in at the surgery and told me that, once more, Jeff Mallock had confounded my diagnosis. "Hey, remember that cow you were treating for magnesium deficiency? She never did no good, and I sent her into Mallock's. Well, you know what was really the matter with her? Wormit tail. Jeff said if you'd no but cut tail off, that cow would have gotten up and walked away." It was no good arguing or saying there was no such thing as worm in the tail. Jeff knew. That was all about it. If only Jeff had taken his priceless opportunities to acquire a common-sense knowledge, it wouldn't have been so bad. But instead he built up a weird pathology of his own and backed it up by black magic remedies gleaned from his contacts with the more primitive members of the farming community. His 4 stock diseases were stagnation of lungs, black rot, gastric ulcers and gallstones. It was a quartet which made the vets tremble for miles around. Another cross which the vets had to bear was his unique gift of being able to take one look at a dead animal on a farm and pronounce immediately on the cause of death. The farmers, awestruck by his powers, were always asking me why I couldn't do it. But I was unable to dislike the man. He would have had to be more than human to resist the chance to be important, and there was no malice in his actions. Still, it made things uncomfortable at times, and I liked to be on the spot myself whenever possible, especially when Isaac Cranford was involved. Cranford was a hard man, a man who had cast his life in a mould of iron austerity, a sharp bargainer, a win-at-all-costs character, and in a region where thrift was general, he was noted for meanness. He farmed some of the best land in the Lower Dale. His shorthorns won prizes regularly at the shows, but he was nobody's friend. Mr. Bateson, his neighbour to the north, summed it up. "That feller 'ud skin a flea for its hide." Mr. Dickon, his neighbour to the south, put it differently. "If he gets hold on a pound note, by God, it's a prisoner." This morning's meeting had had its origin the previous day. A phone call mid-afternoon from Mr. Cranford. "I've had a cow struck by lightning. She's laid dead in the field." I was surprised. "Lightning? Are you sure? We haven't had a storm today." "Maybe you haven't, but we have here." All right. I'll come and have a look at her." Driving to the farm, I couldn't work up much enthusiasm for the impending interview. This lightning business could be a bit of a headache. All farmers were insured against lightning stroke. It was usually part of their fire policy. And after a severe thunderstorm, it was common enough for the vets' phones to start ringing with requests to examine dead beasts. The insurance companies were reasonable about it. If they received a certificate from the vet that he believed lightning to be the cause of death, they would usually pay up without fuss. In cases of doubt, they would ask for a post-mortem or a second opinion from another practitioner. The difficulty was that there are no diagnostic post-mortem features they go on. Occasionally a bruising of the tissues under the skin, but very little else. The happiest situation was when the beast was found with the telltale scorch marks running from an ear down the leg to earth into the ground. Often the animal would be found under a tree which itself had obviously been blasted and torn by lightning. Diagnosis was easy then. 99% of the farmers were looking only for a square deal, and if their vet found some other clear cause of death they would accept his verdict philosophically, but the odd one could be very difficult. I had heard Siegfried tell of one old chap who had called him out to verify a lightning death. The long scorch marks on the carcass were absolutely classic, and Siegfried, viewing them, had been almost lyrical. "Beautiful, Charlie, beautiful. I've never seen more typical marks, but there's just one thing." He put an arm round the old man's shoulder. "What a great pity you let the candle grease fall on the skin." The old man looked closer and thumped a fist into his palm. "Dang it, you're right, master. I've mucked job up, and I took pains o'er it and all. Been on for dang near an hour." He walked away muttering. He showed no embarrassment, only disgust at his own technological shortcomings. But this, I thought, as the stone walls flipped past the car windows, would be very different. Cranford was in the habit of getting his own way, right or wrong, and if he didn't get it today there would be trouble. I drove through the farm gate and along a neat tarmac road across the single field. Mr. Cranford was standing motionless in the middle of the yard, and I was struck, not for the first time, by the man's resemblance to a big, hungry bird. The hunched, narrow shoulders, the forward thrust, sharp-beaked face, the dark overcoat hanging loosely on the bony frame. I wouldn't have been surprised if he had spread his wings and flapped his way onto the byre roof. Instead, he nodded impatiently at me and began to hasten with short, tripping steps to a field at the back of the house. It was a large field, and the dead cow lay almost in the centre. There were no trees, no hedges, not even a small bush. My hopeful picture of the body under a stricken tree melted immediately, leaving an anxious void. We stopped beside the cow, and Mr. Cranford was the first to speak. "Bound to be lightning. Can't be out else. Nasty storm, then this good beast dropping down dead." I looked at the grass around the big short horn. It had been churned and torn out, leaving patches of bared earth. "But it hasn't exactly dropped down, has it? It died in convulsions. You can see where its feet have kicked out the grass." "All right, then. It had a convulsion, but it was lightning that caused it." Mr. Cranford had fierce little eyes, and they darted flitting glances at my shirt collar, Mackintosh belt, Wellingtons. He never could quite bring himself to look anybody in the eye. "I doubt it, Mr. Cranford. One of the signs of lightning stroke is that the beast has fallen without a struggle. Some of them even have grass in their mouths." "Oh, I know all about that," Cranford snapped, his thin face flushing. "I've been among livestock for half a century, and this isn't the first beast I've seen that's been struck. They're not all the same, you know." "Oh, I realise that. But you see, this death could have been caused by so many things." "What sort of things?" "Well, anthrax for a start, magnesium deficiency, heart trouble. There's quite a list. I really think we ought to do a post-mortem to make sure." "Now, see here. Are you saying I'm trying to do something I shouldn't?" "Not at all. I'm only saying we should make sure before I write a certificate. We can go and see her opened at Mallock's, and believe me, if there's no other obvious cause of death, you'll get the benefit of the doubt. The insurance people are pretty good about it." Mr. Cranford's predatory features sank lower into his coat collar. He dug his hands viciously into his pockets. "I've had veterinarians at these jobs afore. Proper experienced veterinarians too." The little eyes flashed in the direction of my left ear. "They've never messed about like this. What's the use of going to all that trouble? Why do you have to be so damn particular?" Why indeed, I thought. Why make an enemy of this man? He wielded a lot of power in the district, prominent in the local farmers' union, a member of every agricultural committee for miles around. He was a wealthy, successful man, and if people didn't like him, they respected his knowledge and listened to him. He could do a young vet a lot of harm. Why not write the certificate and go home? This is to certify that I have examined the above-mentioned animal, and in my opinion, lightning stroke was the cause of death. It would be easy, and Cranford would be mollified. It would be the end of the whole thing. Why antagonise this dangerous character for nothing? Maybe it really was lightning anyway. I turned to face Mr. Cranford, trying in vain to look into the eyes that always veered away at the last moment. I'm sorry, but I feel we ought to have a look inside this cow. I'll ring Mallock and ask him to pick her up, and we can see her in the morning. I'll meet you there at 10 o'clock. Will that be all right? Reckon it'll have to be, Cranford spat out. It's a piece of nonsense, but I suppose I've got to humour you. But just let me remind you, this was a good cow, worth all of £80. I can't afford to lose that amount of money. I want my rights. I'm sure you'll get them, Mr. Cranford. And before I have her moved, I'd better take a blood film to eliminate anthrax. The farmer had been under a mountain load of pressure. As a pillar of the Methodist chapel, his range of language was restricted, so he vented his pent-up feelings by kicking out savagely at the carcass. His toe made contact with the unyielding backbone, and he hopped around on one leg for a few seconds. Then he limped off towards the house. I was alone as I nicked the dead ear with my knife and drew a film of blood across a couple of glass slides. It hadn't been a happy session, and the one tomorrow didn't hold out much more promise. I enclosed the blood films carefully in a cardboard box and set off for Skeldale House to examine them under the microscope. So it wasn't a particularly cheerful group which assembled at the knacker yard the following morning. Even Jeff, though he preserved his usual Buddha-like expression, was in fact deeply offended. The account he had given me when I first arrived at the yard was fragmentary, but I could piece the scene together. Jeff, leaping from his lorry at Cranford's, sweeping the carcass with a piercing glance, and making his brilliant spot diagnosis. Stagnation on lungs. I can allus tell by the look in their eyes and the way their hair lies along back. Waiting confidently for the wandering gasps, the congratulatory speeches which always followed his tour de force. Then Mr. Cranford, almost dancing with rage, "Shut your big stupid mouth, Mallock. Thou knows nowt about it. This cow was struck by lightning, and you'd better remember that." And now, bending my head over the carcass, I couldn't find a clue anywhere. No sign of bruising when the skin was removed, the internal organs clean and normal. I straightened up and pushed my fingers through my hair. The boiler bubbled softly, puffing out odoriferous wisps into the already highly charged atmosphere. 2 dogs licked busily at a pile of meat meal. Then a chill of horror struck through me. The dogs had competition. A little boy with golden curls was pushing a forefinger into the heap, inserting it in his mouth, and sucking with rapt enjoyment. "Look at that!" I quavered. The knacker's man's face lit up with paternal pride. "Aye," he said happily, "it isn't only the 4-legged uns what lacks my meal. Wonderful stuff, full of nourishment." His good humour completely restored, he struck a match and began to puff appreciatively at a short pipe which was thickly encrusted with evidence of his grisly trade. I dragged my attention back to the job in hand. "Cut into the heart, will you, Jeff?" I said. Jeff deftly sliced the big organ from top to bottom, and I knew immediately that my search was over. The auricles and ventricles were almost completely occluded by a cauliflower-like mass growing from the valves. Varicose endocarditis, common in pigs but seldom seen in cattle. There's what killed your cow, Mr. Cranford, I said. Cranford aimed his nose at the heart. Fiddlesticks. You're not telling me them little things could kill a great beast like that? They're not so little. Big enough to stop the flow of blood. I'm sorry, but there's no doubt about it. Your cow died of heart failure. And how about lightning? No sign of it, I'm afraid. You can see for yourself. And what about my £80? I'm truly sorry about that, but it doesn't alter the facts. Facts? What facts? I've come along this morning and you've shown me nowt to make me change my opinion. Well, there's nothing more I can say. It's a clear-cut case. Mr. Cranford stiffened in his perching stance. He held his hands against the front of his coat, and the fingers and thumbs rubbed together unceasingly, as though fondling the beloved banknotes which were slipping away from him. His face sunk deeper in his collar, appeared still sharper in outline. Then he turned to me and made a ghastly attempt to smile, and his eyes, trained on my lapels, tried valiantly to inch their way upwards. There was a fleeting instant when they met my gaze before flickering away in alarm. He drew me to one side and addressed myself to my larynx. There was a wheedling note in the hoarse whisper. Now look here, Mr. Herriot. We're both men of the world. You know as well as I do that the insurance company can afford this loss a lot better nor me. So why can't you just say it was lightning? Even though I think it isn't. Well, what the hangment does it matter? You can say it is, can't you? Nobody's going to know. I scratched my head. But what would bother me, Mr. Cranford, is that I would know. You would know. The farmer was mystified. That's right. And it's no good. I can't give you a certificate for this cow, and that's the end of it. Dismay, disbelief, frustration chased across Mr. Cranford's features. Well, I'll tell you this. I'm not leaving the matter here. I'm going to see your boss about you. He swung round and pointed at the cow. There's no sign of disease there. Trying to tell me it's all due to little things in the heart. You don't know your job. You don't even know what them things are. Jeff Mallock removed his unspeakable pipe from his mouth. But I know. It's what I said. Stagnation at lungs is caused by milk from milk vein getting back into the body. Finally it gets to heart, and then it's over with. Them's milk clots you're looking at. Cranford rounded on him. Shut up, you great gumph. You're as bad as this feller here. It was lightning killed my good cow. Lightning! He was almost screaming. Then he controlled himself and spoke quietly to me. You'll hear more of this, Mr. Knowledge. And I'll just tell you one thing. You'll never walk onto my farm again. He turned and hurried away with his quick stepping gait. I said good morning to Jeff and climbed wearily into my car. Well, everything had worked out just great. If only vetting just consisted of treating sick animals. But it didn't. There were so many other things. I started the engine and drove away.